Back now to Australia and a country on edge after a shooting during a Hanukkah event that left 15 people dead. Officials are calling this a terrorist attack, saying it was designed to target Jewish people. The victims include a Holocaust survivor and a 10-year-old and two rabbis. Police identified the two suspects as a father and son. Officers shot and killed the father at the scene. The son was taken to the hospital with serious injuries.
And tonight, local Jewish communities are responding.
First Alert 6's Sydney Babb joins us in the studio and was at the Jewish Federation of Omaha talking about the attack this afternoon. So what was the discussion like, Sydney?
Brian and Aaron, the mood was solemn. Local and state leaders were there, from Governor Pillen's office to Mayor Ewing's office, City Council, along with other rabbis and law enforcement. They all condemned the attacks, many saying that we need to move beyond words and take action to stand against anti-Semitism. The Anti-Defamation League reported a big jump in anti-Semitic attacks, increasing from 2,700 to 9,000 over the last several years, coinciding with the Gaza war, which began just over 2 years ago. Sharon Brodkey with the Jewish Federation believes that some anti-Semitic attacks could be based on people's opinions on the war and how it's played out.
There are many Jews in the diaspora who have been very uncomfortable with certain aspects, to be perfectly candid, with certain aspects of the prosecution of the war. That does not give license to people to call for globalizing an intifada, which basically means murdering Jews wherever they are.
Now, law enforcement and the FBI that were at the meeting also spoke, saying people in the community should stay vigilant over the rest of the holiday and report any threats of violence or suspicious activity. In the studio, I'm Sydney Babb, First Alert 6.
Sydney, thank you.